Hello and welcome to Higher Thinking on Higher Ed. I am Sharlyn Carrington of Content Strong Communications, the communications and marketing partner of choice for universities, colleges, and nonprofits. Today, I am excited to continue diving into the trends and the challenges encountered by leaders in higher education, and I am honored to welcome Rahn Franklin to the hot seat today. Ron is the Vice President of Inclusive Excellence at Bethel University, where he leads strategy to advance institutional belonging and mission-driven equity. A CCCU Diversity Commission member and a cultural intelligence fellow, Ron brings a background in counseling, organizational leadership, and student affairs to his work in shaping inclusive learning environments. Thank you so much today for bringing your expertise to this conversation. How are you doing?
Oh, Sharlyn, it is a gift and an honor to be with you. I really can't say the words are limited when it comes to the appreciation of being invited into this space with you all and with our practitioners who are working to help make higher education a better place. So I'm gifted to be here with you.
Well, I mean, as I was saying to you just before we officially started, I mean, I've had some conversations with others at your institution, but you have such an interesting lens and perspective based on, where you were situated in your institution. The first question I always like to ask is set us up a little bit. Give us a little bit of, the context of your world and your role, leading inclusive excellence and belonging at Bethel, how you're kind of working to integrate that mission into the broader culture, the broader strategy, the broader communications, I guess, of the university right now?
Yeah, great question. That's straight to it, and I love it. Cheryl, I'll give you just a quick snapshot, maybe even just my pathway to the space, which then kind of sets the orientation about how I
That's great.
am gifted to walk into it in terms of how we make it happen with a team effort institutionally toward inclusive excellence. So yeah, I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and so my background, I'm a urban city kid who ended up going to college out in the country and met some folks who through college helped me reimagine what I was capable of and the opportunity that one might have through higher education to help make the world a better place. So higher education has become a home for me. Growing up in lower income, first generation kind of family experiences, and then seeing what education does to unlock human potential really impacted my life. And so that led me to a pathway, I think, of inclusive excellence without knowing it.
You're
Uh,
right.
Walking alongside people who had experiences that were similar to mine, and I was trying to figure out how do they become their best. And then for folks who were really different than me,
You're
uh,
right.
still trying to ask that question: what does it look like to help unlock their potential? How can I be a part of them being their best? And athletics really helped with that for me. So my pathway to higher education came primarily through athletics, and it was football that actually helped extend my pathway as a professional athlete for a short time. But I studied sports and fitness management initially, and then I thought I was going to go into business. And then my pathway led me into an undergraduate degree in kinesiology. And so I love paying attention to how things work, specifically the human body. And then from there, the human mind. And I went into counseling as a master's student. And then from there, while I was entering into leadership spaces as a resident director, getting my master's degree all the while, and then eventually playing some professional football while leaving basketball behind. I ended up in this space of higher ed leadership, specifically at Northwestern College, where I got to serve as a multicultural uh, counselor while also serving in support roles regarding academic achievement and academic success. So that work continued to inspire me. And there were folks along the way that kept encouraging me, Ron, you should get your next level of education. So I got my master's, got my PhD. And that's kind of what led me to this space at Bethel. But specifically, the work that I get to do with inclusive excellence, you almost defined it yourself in the intro of recognizing this is about infusing all aspects of the university with work that is both excellent and inclusive. I would suggest to us that if we are excellent in any form or fashion in what we do in higher education, it should be inclusive of all the people who have access to our institutions to help them be at their best. So that's a little bit of a snapshot, Sharlyn, of the work I get to do. But you lead me where we would need to go next, because we can talk about what that looks like in terms of goal setting and infrastructure development, goals and metrics, those types of things, and even our communications to the broader community and to ourselves about who we are and what we do.
Well, I want to touch on all of those things, but I have to say, what a well-rounded individual you are. The amount of different things and different skills and different avenues you've been involved in and you've led in, I think is quite incredible and exceptional. And I think you touched a little bit there on this idea that, higher ed can open up multiple pathways for you. You would start in one thing. I did something similar. I started, in Japanese education when I first started in university, and with a light for business, international business, and
Yeah.
headed completely in a different direction into communications and DEI myself. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that just really speaks to, once again, the value of
Mm.
higher education, which I think, certainly in some of the previous conversations I've had has been called into question a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think particularly right now, what I'm
Mm.
interested in from your perspective really is, you know, you're doing this work at a time when institutions really are facing both internal urgency, external political pressure around DEI specifically. What shifts are you seeing kind of across higher ed, across the board? And how are they shaping the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, the national rhetoric, one, I think, is questioning the value of higher education. And in some ways, my lived experience helps reframe the value. Uh, and it requires storytelling. And so, as we think
Right.
about the marketing and the communications aspects of this work right now, higher education is in a space and in a season where we have to explain and describe the type of impact not only that it has on individuals, but for the common good. And
Right.
that's what I love about specifically the work that I get to do in a Christian higher education space. Some of the model behind who we are and what we do is that we educate for God's glory and our neighbor's good. And so, if we are doing what we profess to do, and our namesake speaks to that, we want to be a place that helps reflect it. In our case, the house of God, which
Right.
indicates that all people are thriving and are at in pursuit of their best, of their highest calling. And we've got a tagline that also says that our work is about helping students belong and become. And we've tried to help ensure that that's happening for not only our students, but also for our faculty and our staff. So, in a number of ways, the biggest changes, I think the work is continuing,
Right.
has to take on some agile reframing. And in some ways, I think the critiques are helpful because we have to be able to define what it is that we are after, what's the end goal. Um, but I think the greatest challenge is that it also means we have to identify the gaps in these
Right.
systems that we've built and the ways in which achievement, access, um, human flourishing has been differentiated through this endeavor of educating society. So,
Right.
who gets to go to college? What does it cost to attend? Um, who achieves and persists and graduates, and what opportunities come as a result of participating in this endeavor? All of those questions, I think, are really difficult for us to explore together as a higher education community or society more broadly. But I found that if we can ask those questions of ourselves to say who gets in, who doesn't, who stays, who doesn't, um, who is successful afterwards, and who's not. Those types of questions are, I think, what begin to allow us to unlock the potential. But it's such a delicate dance because if you critique yourself too harshly and publicly, then it
Right.
leans into the public conversation about, well, what value is this endeavor? What benefit does it add to society? So we have to kind of be able to balance what I think is both celebration and critique, or maybe in reverse order. We're able to critique ourselves in a really helpful way, but then also celebrate the progress that has been made because truthfully, and I can speak to my own pathways to success, if you will, that has been facilitated through higher education. Um, the statistics are pretty stark about the pathways forward for Black men in particular. And I can hang my hat on a number of things that influenced my achievements, but it was people and it was opportunities that were paved specifically through higher education. Like I had very, very limited imagination of what I could or should be.
Right.
Society was painting as a picture for me pathways to prison were really clear. Uh,
Right.
Pathways in other spaces, like becoming a vice president of inclusive excellence, those were a little more foggy. And so education is kind of what helped set that pavement in terms of an opportunity for me to not be um, one in three Black men who would be dead or in jail, if you will, at the time of my upbringing. By the time that you were 33. And so education really helped change the trajectory of my life. And that's why I do the work that I do now, is that I can see the potential for others because of the pathway that was laid out for me through education. And so I am all about finding ways to help humans flourish through this educational opportunity that we offer, not only at Bethel, but I think broadly in society. And educated citizenry helps make the world a better place.
That's it. That's it.
All dimensions, all dimensions.
That's it. I think that's such a point, a big point, a very, very important point. And I want to take a step back quickly and just think about, you know, all the things you just brought up there, really drilling down this idea of the cultural context, specifically in you know, certain demographics. I
Mhm.
understand. I'm with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think about, you know, the fact that there is a person or an individual that you, for example, in your institution, that they've said, we want you to be the VP of inclusive excellence and have this role. There's your entire institution has now said, this is important for us. We are naming that this idea of inclusivity is something that is important and something that you're clearly as an institution are still pushing forward. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like what, and maybe it's, you know, get leaning back to, I guess, the overall institutional strategy is, why do you think, you know, the institution as a whole thought that this was so important, and how are you really seeing that translate into kind of your day to day and the kinds of things that you're trying to do and make happen? And in a few minutes I'm going to ask you about metrics, because I really want to know how you measure some of the
Yep.
things that you do and what that actually looks like. But the first part.
Yeah, yeah. Let's start with the foundation. I love when this question is asked because Bethel and actually many educational institutions were intended to serve the people that were in its community. And
Right.
for Bethel, in our context, its origins actually are in Chicago, but an immigrant, Swedish immigrant in particular, was landing in the States wanting to educate ministry leaders who were Swedish. And so we have an immigrant foundation that ranges back 150 years. And often I think it's helpful, and we would call this like a Sankofa journey in
Right.
many of the communities that I operate in. But in order to move forward, you have to be able to look backwards at the same time, and that's what informs the pathway forward. So looking back at our immigrant history 150 years ago, serving Swedish immigrants, that is where the origins of this inclusive excellence work actually begins for us at Bethel. Different iterations have come as a result. So as communities change, so too do your foci. We have been embedded in the northern tip of St. Paul, Minnesota, which and it's a really diverse community. And so immigrants continue to inform our work. And you also have immigrants of a domestic type, right? Thinking
Right.
about Hispanic Latino community members, folks who have come from the African diaspora, uh, who yeah, would identify as Black in a wide variety of ways. So we've got an immigrant history that helps drive the nature of this work. The one thing I am gifted to do at Bethel is also to extend our imagination about what diversity is. So we often have the conversation of
Right.
race and ethnicity, but we also have the opportunity to talk about what it looks like with regard to gender or socioeconomic class.
Intersectionality. Right.
Yes, there's all these connections about human identities that, again, I think our biblical foundation gives us an opportunity to talk about how we want to see humans of all types be at their best, and how our educational offerings help provide that opportunity. But that's the center of the work, and I want to make sure I don't miss the core of the question. But 150 years ago, we were serving immigrants. Today, we are serving immigrants, perhaps of a different type, but
Right.
the foundation of serving those who are in our neighborhood, that are in our community. If you look at the demographics of St. Paul, Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, our most recent work, which will also then move us toward the metrics, is to ensure that we are serving our local community again with the focus on God's glory and our neighbors' good. What does our neighborhood look like? Are those neighbors here in our context, and are we serving them well so that our community can thrive? So those are some of the foundational components. Make sure you keep me focused on your question, though. Did we get there? Otherwise, yeah, we can start leaning directly into the metrics and how that, even the framework of our metrics, and what the specific tools are that we use to measure our capacity to reflect the house of God.
You did get there. But before before I even ask you about the metrics, set me up a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about the some of the wins and some of the sticking points you're dealing with now, because that gives me a good idea of how to
Mhm.
shape what it is you're really trying to do in more of a almost like a tangible context. Like what
Yeah.
kind of I don't know, partnerships or approaches have kind of gained the most traction at Bethel with relation to this work? What kind of barriers, what kind of fatigue are you seeing in advancing inclusive excellence in the institution?
Yeah. So let me get you straight to the what we call our three C's. So in our attempt to reflect the house of God, we want to focus our energy on the climate, the composition, and the character of our institution. And as we try to simplify that as much as possible for the ears of not only the listeners, but the members of our community and our constituents, we want Bethel to look, feel, think, and act like the house of God. So the
Right.
look is about our compositional diversity. So that's a question about, do we reflect the neighborhood? Does the
Yeah.
neighborhood find itself reflected here? And vice versa. And the climate is, does this feel like a place where people can thrive? And when we say people, we mean that with the broadest stretch of the imagination, namely because of even our theological foundation of all of humanity being made in God's image. We believe they are endowed with the opportunity to become their best. And so that's where the belong and become kind of spills itself into the way that we do this work. And then the character component, which is one that might be arguably the foundation, right? We we need to continue to enhance our what we call our ability to think and act like our namesake. So, what are we teaching ourselves as faculty and staff? What are we teaching our students regarding their ability to make connections beyond the classroom, so that it's actionable learning, so that we can have a positive impact and not only perpetuate thriving for ourselves, but also for our neighbors, regardless of where we get sent in the world after we're done with our undergraduate or graduate education, right? We go out to serve, and we want to do that well. So those are the core components that help set the framework for then our connections across the institution to say, you know what does advancement have to say about inclusive excellence? What does admissions and enrollment and marketing have to say about inclusive excellence? Uh, what I hope you can catch in that is it's contextual. So every department
Right.
has a different means by which they engage inclusive excellence, all the while fueling the university's hopes, goals, and aspirations toward being a place that is inclusively excellent. So I think initially it could have been imagined that inclusive excellence is to be driven by a leader like myself, and everything flows through me. And we also function in a decentralized campus community, where the dance really for me as a leader is to figure out how do we do both centralized and decentralized activities that
Right.
allow people to do what fits their discipline and their context, um, but also do that in partnership with me and my team. Because in some ways we are the resident experts, but we certainly are not the experts in marketing and
Every other discipline,
right.
of course.
Yeah. So that sets the foundation from which I do my work. I'm not a board of trustees member, but I work with the board of trustees to help ensure that they are even cultivating the climate, composition, and character, or the look, feel, thinking, and acting that allows us to be true to who we say that we are. So our rhetoric matches our results. And so my leadership is about ensuring that each of those areas of the campus community is developing those capacities, so that we're not just talking the talk, but we're also walking the the walk. So you ready to talk about some numbers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm digesting that a little bit, and it's great. I think it's the point is well made. Is this idea that inclusion is not a one shop stop and done goal or piece. It is really something that needs to be pervasive across any organization, and it really needs to see itself framed based on what discipline or what area you're in. So I see, and I also see that as a little bit of a challenge for you. Maybe talk about that a little bit before you get into numbers. Is tell me a little bit more about some of the challenge even in that work for you, specifically because, as you rightfully said, like you're an expert in this, but you're not an expert in everything else, even though we need to be able to see how inclusion is streamlining through everything else across the institution.
Yeah, I think that's like the definition of we maybe call it a scientific problem, is the
Right.
fact that uh, if the work is to be sustainable, it has to have its groundings contextually in each of the areas of campus. Um, but in so doing, I don't know what your academic journey looked like, but it was not always focused on inclusive excellence. And so that's the dance of figuring out how do we do our disciplined work well and do it inclusively. Uh,
Right.
so that is the movement, and I think is the definition of the challenge, is to, for me, enter into someone else's home, someone else's space of expertise, and
Right.
affirm their giftings and what they have created before I was here, but also then engage together in a problem solving activity to say, hey, where are your opportunities? Not only celebrating what has been, but also recognizing what we can create together. And goodness, as we think about the nature of nuanced communications, right? That has been the significant challenge, at least in my lived experience, to recognize. And this is where I think athletics gives me a unique vantage point to say, hey, we're good. What does it look like to become great? Um,
Yeah.
Doing that with delicate communication is
Delicately. Yeah.
really, really important because there's a lot of reasons that folks maybe would run away from a conversation. But at Bethel, what we've been able to set as our foundation in terms of this shared goal of helping to cultivate a Christ-centered learning environment that fosters flourishing for all, like that's what set the foundation. So then we can enter into a conversation about student success, right, with academic affairs, or we can talk about ensuring that our educational infrastructure, that could be our learning management system, is set up in such a way that all students can thrive, those who can hear and those who can't hear, those who can see and those who can't see, right? What are the ways in which we help ensure that our system is set up to help support all students' well-being and thriving? So there's mechanisms in place to help build those capacities. I would be overstating it if I suggested to you that we've completely figured it out, Sharlyn. We have not. And so it's a journey that also keeps me fueled as a leader because there's always something that can be
To
enhanced.
go and to shoot for. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've really beautifully led us directly into the big question of numbers. So tell me a little bit about what are you looking at? What are you tracking right now? How are you actually about? And this is because of the nature of, this subject matter, and exactly as you rightfully said, this is something that should be embedded in every aspect of the institution as a whole. How do you evaluate something like that, right? How do you demonstrate, how do you watch for, your highs and your lows, your successes and your dips, right? And whether that's qualitative, whether that's quantitative, how do you know that you're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, well, let's do the big picture stuff, and then we can kind of zoom down into the details. So as we think about climate, and actually, let me pull back really quickly. Um, there's student focused work, and then there's staff and faculty focused work,
Yeah.
and there's a layer of board and leadership, right? And so We try to work our way through each of those aspects, looking at the climate composition and character of our student experience, of our staff, which includes faculty, and then our
Hmm.
leadership. And so here's just a few of the snapshots, right? So if we're talking about climate, we can, and I think this one resonates generally with most campus communities and its leaders. But what does the sense of belonging slash psychological safety look like for students, for faculty, staff,
Right.
and our board of trustees? So there's different units of measure within each of those components, and I'll just tap into a couple of quick examples that might resonate with our listeners. As we talk about belonging with our students, often what we're looking at is satisfaction inventory results, or the SSI, student satisfaction inventory, and that's what gives us a snapshot of our campus climate. As we look at our staff and our faculty, there is a best workplaces survey. Specifically for us, we use the best Christian workplaces survey that gives us a
All
really robust understanding of this framework of a flourishing organization. And so it looks at communication, compensation, recruitment, retention, all of the aspects of this flourish model that's built within their organization, and you can explore that at your leisure. But they have some proprietary materials built within. But that's what we use to help measure year over year how our
right.
employees are experiencing, and that, again, that includes faculty and staff, how they're experiencing their employment at the university. The gift is that then each VP can enter into their team conversations and start to problem solve together to say, hey, it looks like we're really doing well with communications, but we also need to celebrate our campus community and the gifts of each individual on our teams. How might we go about
Mhm.
that so that the climate feels like a place that folks are really flourishing and thriving and want to come back, right? So that
Right.
drives employee retention, which then helps us spill into this conversation about compositional diversity. This is probably one of the most tenuous points of conversation because it's often associated with affirmative action.
Right.
We need to say this kind of outright. All of the work that we do is in line with the government's expectations about employment law and ensuring that non-discrimination is being maintained, which is really a fascinating conversation right now. Because
About merit and about how do
yes,
you
yes,
actually demonstrate what merit means.
right,
Right.
right, right. So for us, we ensure that our legal standards are being maintained. We stay in consultation with legal counsel to help ensure that our work is in line with legal expectations, right, and government regulations, and our mission and our purpose to help ensure that we look like our neighborhood, and that we serve our neighborhood well. So we look at things like student recruitment. What are the metrics in that space to help show us who we're serving? And we look at enrollment, we look at retention, persistence, and graduation rates, and we want to help ensure that all students are achieving enrollment, persistence, and graduation at comparable rates, as close as possible to have no gaps. And if there's gaps, that's where we
Right.
focus our energy and our attention and our programming. The same way with our staff and our faculty, we want to find the top talent that's in the market and help ensure that that top talent finds Bethel as a place that they can be employed and then be growing in their capacities as an employee, as faculty, staff, and actually our student staff. But we want everyone to be, again, at their best. And so we try to find ways to help ensure that we measure the experience and the tenure even of folks, and pay attention if there's gaps that are emerging. So for example, if um, there's less representation or there's less retention for certain people from certain demographic groups, then we begin to retool our focus to help ensure that those gaps are closed. In the same way with board recruitment and retention, we want to see the same. We want to have our board look like our employee base, and our employee base looks like our student base, and our student base looks like our campus, or excuse me, looks like our contextual composition. So what does the Twin Cities look like? And does our leadership and our employee base look like that? And then lastly, we look at our character as well. And so what are we doing to develop our, in some ways, historically has been referred to as cultural competence, if you will. More broadly, we want to see, are we preparing our students to go out and serve in their discipline with effectiveness and excellence? And that requires that our staff are ready to equip those students to do so. And our faculty are equipped to do so, and our board of trustees are equipped to do so. So specifically what we've been working on, historically, we've worked with strengths finders, materials, but we have also shifted, and in some part it's due to my relationships and connections with the Cultural Intelligence Center and leaders in that space, and David Livermore in particular. What does it look like for us to be developing the capacity to function effectively in situations characterized by difference? And so there's a specific measurement tool that the Cultural Intelligence Scale utilizes, and we use that to help keep a gauge on how effective we are with our motivation to connect with those who are different than ourselves, our knowledge of the differences that exist around us. And again, we have to continue to stretch our understanding that this is not just about race and ethnicity. Some of us are oriented to time differently. And so even Sharlyn, I have to be mindful. How do I help ensure that the way in which we are managing the time and this opportunity that we have to speak together is meeting the needs of you and the constituents, not just what Ron wants to do with time, because for me, time can disappear when you're having fun. And so that doesn't always mold well when you have goals to achieve, right? But also, how might we achieve those goals in ways that are different based on the ways in which people are oriented to time? So that's been really formative for our community to help see that difference does not only have resonance with one's phenotypic expression or the ways in which their epithelial cells, if you will. I'm teasing a little bit, being a nerd in this moment, but how much in skin, right? That is important, and so too is our background and our upbringing that has shaped how we see the world, and that's actually a strength. If we can leverage those differences, it actually drives revenue and opportunities to expand into new markets and ideation and sharing of great ideas that allow us to make better decisions. And so that's why we do what we do with regard to character development. So we have numbers behind each of those. There's global standards, there's contextual standards based on higher education performance and achievement with regard to retention and graduation rates. There's lots of ways that you can cut your data up, but for us, what we are seeking is equitable outcomes across lines of difference that again help foster human flourishing. So that's what we're all about. We look at our climate composition and our character. We have ways of measuring that with our students, with our faculty, with our staff, and even our board of trustees. But it can get really big really fast. And so we've had to try to keep our focus on, again, our climate and our composition and our character, or in other words, the way that this place feels, the way that we look compositionally, and the way that we think and the way that we act regarding our learning and development mechanisms and platforms, both co-curricular and curricularly for faculty, staff, and our students. So it's been fun. We're still developing our capacities and flexing those muscles or developing those muscles because it is not always built in. So we've had to develop the capacity to make data-driven decisions that help us continue to keep our eyes on the prize, which is to, again, cultivate a space that fosters flourishing for all.
I think you touched on so many different things there that come to mind, and I won't belabor the points. But, certainly for me, I mean, all the conversation around representation and composition, I did my master's thesis in something very similar, and having that, really trying to translate that idea of why representation and composition of your broader teams, from leadership, faculty and staff to student, the broader community that surrounds the institution, is so important to actually to meet those success outcomes. And telling that story, I find this is for some reason is such a challenge. But really that idea of, and clearly you guys are doing it as well, is being able to be data driven and connecting back some of the numbers to kind of the larger, for some people they need to hear like larger business outcomes, right? They
Yeah,
need to
yeah,
hear
yeah.
doing all of this drives excellence in this way, doing all of this drives revenue in this way
Mhm.
because, and
Yeah.
sometimes people, as you rightfully said, certain people place value on different things and because of their upbringing and they understand things differently. There really continues to be an importance to tell that story in different ways so that it connects in different ways with different people, right? So I think all of that is a huge, huge point. My last question
Yeah.
for you is, and I'm sure I likely missed another question I wanted to ask you, but my
No.
last question is the big kind of magic wand question. If
Mhm.
you could remove one barrier right now in your world, in your day-to-day life at your institution, whether it's, a barrier to advancing inclusion and excellence, whether it's cultural or structural or strategic, whatever it is, what would it be? What would you use that magic wand on, and what would that mean for, your broader world?
Mm. Um,
It's a tough
yeah, I
one.
think it is. Well, there's so many. Maybe we need multiple magic wands with.
Well, multiple, listen, it's an all-powerful magic wand. You could use it on multiple things.
um, I think uh, systematic resilience is the magic wand that I would help us wave so that we can continue to measure and monitor our progress. Uh, there's a lot of shiny things that pop up from time to time, and my hope is that we stay focused on the value that higher education brings, not only to impact individual lives, but the lives of institutions, the lives of organizations, the lives of society more broadly, both again at an individual and institutional level. That then drives where we spend our resources, where we focus our energy and uh, sustain the work. And that's one of the things I've really appreciated about being here at Bethel is that we've started to figure out how do we ensure that our mission remains clear, that we are centered on Jesus and ensuring that the well-being of our neighbors is continually perpetuated through this
Mhm.
endeavor. Education is a good for humanity. And if we do it well, it should include all members of our society. In some form or
Mhm.
fashion, it touches every portion of creation ultimately. So, what we do in and through our educational journey should help make the world better. And so, if we had a magic wand, what would that wave look like? I think it's a continued and sustained focus on the very purpose of the educational endeavor, which is to make the world a better place. Ultimately, and education, I think, has a really, really powerful way of making that happen for individuals and institutions. And then we can get down into the weeds to talk about what that looks like in the specific areas of our campus. But if our guard can be dropped in this season of political tensions, in this season of value assessment and propositions about how we educate and who we serve, I think we got to get back to the basics and understand that an educated citizenry makes better decisions and helps make society better. It helps drive the economy. It helps drive healthy ecosystems. It helps drive decision making. It helps drive business. So there are so many goods, and I would hope that we can continue to keep our groundedness in those goods rather than imagining that we need to dismantle hardly anything. I think we can continue to build better. rather than looking at deconstruction based on our political affiliations and et cetera. I'm less interested in that conversation actually, and more interested in seeing how we continue to make the world a better place through the opportunities that higher education offers to society. So I get really excited about that. We want to see humans, we want to see humanity, we want to see the world flourish. And that's the core for us while we center our energies on the golden rule and really the basics that really stretch across politics and across religion. We have a particular bent in that conversation in terms of it being centered on Christ and how it can cultivate the well-being of humanity and society and creation more broadly. But if there was a magic wand, it would be about sustainability, that we weather the storms of the waves of the politics and the leaders and et cetera. Like the core still remains that human flourishing can be fostered through higher education. And I can attest to that as an individual in the ways in which my life has been changed through education, and would love to continue to see that into the future.
I think you've just I feel like you've almost rebranded this entire conversation we've been having as a whole. Certainly, I've been having it kind of across the board with everyone. Is really, throughout every conversation, what comes back to the base of it is what is the value of education, and it's not a question that I ask outright, but it is something that somehow is weaved into every single conversation that we have. And I think what you've touched on there really profoundly is this very, very basic and simplistic idea that I think really would become a great foundation for a brand almost, is really this idea that, educated people make better decisions, period.
Yeah.
That's it. And imagine what that would mean for, the society we are able to build together, period. I feel that's it. That's the soundbite, Ron. That's it. That's
Thanks
it.
for helping me get there. And you are a wonderful facilitator, and I think you saw a need, and I'm humored by this classic movie called Robots that Robin Williams was a star in. But the core conversation was about see a need, fill a need. And
Right.
Sharlyn, I want to thank you for creating space that we can have conversations that continue to help cultivate well-being through higher education. So anyway, I don't I'm learning about giving folks their flowers before moments in which we are standing at the end of our lives. And so thank you for cultivating that conversation, for inspiring us to be the best that we can be here and now, so that the future is better as a result of our work and shared contribution. So blessings to you, my friend. I'm so thankful for this opportunity and can't wait to see what comes of it.
You're thankful, Ron. I'm so thankful. The amount of insights I have gathered from this conversation, and ideally, all of the watchers and listeners will have gathered all of those insights as well. And somehow, if they're not able to see their way through a new challenge, through a challenge that they have, ideally, they're able to take that and be reinvigorated by, the conversation here today. I know certainly I have. So big thank you once again for your time and your experience, and how generous of a conversation this was. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Ideally, these conversations are a little bit of a roadmap for the future of our field. So ideally, we'll all kind of get to work with this. Thank you so much again, Ron.
Yeah. Blessings to you, my friend, and thanks for the time, and love to see what comes next.